Welcome to another episode of the Wild Strength podcast. Today, my guest is Joe Miles, and his walk-up song is Don't Come Lookin' by Jackson Dean. Ooh,
Yeah.
I like it. I feel like a lot of these songs. There we go. He has a really good voice, and we were talking before we hit record that we had both recently just heard of or discovered Jackson Dean. But like I said, I have Joe Miles here. I'll let him introduce himself, but I met him last summer, at the Dixie Deer Classic in North Carolina. Through a friend of mine, and I've kind of just watched his hunting adventures ever since, and watched him kind of build his brand Asio, but I'll let him speak to that as well. But Joe, I'll let you introduce yourself, and then we'll see where the conversation goes.
Awesome. Yeah, Whitney, it was great meeting you at the Dixie Deer Classic. You know, it's neat. I love to see the ladies in the sport that we love so much. I think it's just absolutely super cool. And you and I have talked about it quite a bit, about Asio coming out with a ladies line and getting you to help with that. And we are getting to that point. I do see that coming in the next couple of years. We do have smalls this year, so hopefully we can get you in some tops now that will actually fit.
Yeah.
So Asio Gear. Basically, I've bow hunted whitetail my entire life. My dad was a big hunter, and grew up in a hunting family, and whitetail was our big thing. And started bow hunting when I was 15, and never looked back from a whitetail perspective. And then as I grew in the hunting sport or hunting lifestyle, started branching out and did some adventure type hunts, and Africa, some international stuff, a lot of sheep and goats, and got to experience a lot of that really fun adventure style hunting, and fell in love with that. But whitetail bow hunting is still kind of my passion, and something that I love. I just cannot get enough of it. It doesn't matter whether it's here in South Carolina or in Kansas. And that kind of morphed into the creation of Asio Gear, which is a whitetail bow hunting camouflage clothing line that we launched, really, that we're going into our 5th season with it now. And it's growing and starting to catch on, especially for guys, east of the Mississippi. And so, yeah, it's been a really cool, fun journey.
Yeah, I think, and we'll definitely talk a lot about whitetail hunting, because that was a big reason why I wanted to have you on. I've relatively new to hunting for most people who listen or know me, and I started whitetail hunting in Texas, which I have learned through conversations with people out east that it is vastly different hunting whitetail in Texas than it is in South Carolina and on the East Coast, and mostly just because there's not a lot of public land in Texas. And so unless if you have your own land, or somebody, or you're kind of paying to play out there for the most part. So my experience, I say I've hunted whitetail, but my experience with it has been knowing someone who will let me come out whenever they have the time to let me come out, and sitting a stand. But by no means was it like, I don't know the kind of terrain that whitetail like to frequent. I don't know, there's so much that goes into that. So then when I hear guys out east talk about how obsessed they are with whitetail hunting, when I get the stories and see how much true, because to me it was just like showing up to a blind and shooting a whitetail. And I was like, what is the obsession? I don't get it. But then I hear the stories and everything that goes into, especially if you're hunting public land and setting up the right places and finding the right terrain that they're going to be in. There's so much that goes into it, and very similar to why a lot of Western folks like hunting elk. Just obviously a different animal, different terrains. So yeah, what you said, you've been hunting whitetail since you were 15. What was your kind of big draw to it early on? And then what's kind of kept you doing it all this time?
Yeah, so I think the big draw early on was just I didn't know anything different. I mean, my dad was taking me to the whitetail woods when I was in diapers. So I mean, a funny story. I can remember waking up in a sleeping bag and coming out of the sleeping bag and being in the middle of the woods, not knowing where I was, and all of a sudden a piece of candy would hit me in the top of the head, and I would look up and my dad would be above me with his rifle. He had gotten me out of my little bed in the morning, wrapped me up in a sleeping bag,
Yeah.
hauled me out to the woods. Unbeknownst to me, I'm sound asleep, and I wake up, and he's waiting on. I'm sure I was rustling down there, and he was getting prepared. But yeah, so that was kind of my childhood. Is it was sports and it was hunting. That's
Mhm.
what we did. And on Fridays after the football game, we would leave and go to our lease or farm to hunt. And then on Mondays, sometimes we'd make it back for class, and sometimes we'd only make it back to football practice. So that was really kind of my childhood, and fell in love with it. And when I 12, 13 years old, he kind of let me start doing my own thing and making my own mistakes and learning stuff, and fell in love with the challenge of hunting a particular deer.
Mhm.
And that really is what, and with the bow hunting added into that, the challenge of that was just kind of amazing to be able to locate one particular deer and go after that deer. And it could take a whole season or multiple seasons to be able to capitalize and matching wits with that one deer. And he wins most of the time, which
Mhm.
is a lot of fun. It's a lot of fun. It's very challenging. You have to kind of play chess and try and outthink what he's doing. And then that kind of parlayed into starting to hunt in the Midwest, in Kansas and Illinois, and Montana, Alberta, Mexico, Texas, down where you hunt. I've kind of chased them all over the country. Basically anywhere there's whitetail deer, I've hunted them. And it's all different, it's all unique, and it's an amazing thing for me. I love chasing the whitetail.
Yeah, I think you kind of mentioned, and I've heard the same thing a handful of times. Like guys they'll name a deer, and they're seeing it regularly on their trail cameras, and year after year, they have this same deer. And even for me, starting out, I didn't even understand like how do you know it's the same deer that you're seeing? How do you know what deer you're chasing year after year? But you're so in tune with these deer that you can tell by looking at the antlers. You can tell by the size of them that, yeah, that's the deer that I want. That's the deer that I've been watching for so many years. What is for like me and someone who is maybe not as in depth of a whitetail hunter, like what are the major things that you're looking for and like the trophy buck that you want to get that season? Obviously size matters, but uniqueness too. And then yeah, what like year after year are you constantly looking for?
Yeah, so age is a big thing, and it's all relative, depending on where you are in the country. Like here in South Carolina, for example, we have four, and somebody I'm sure will correct me on this, but it's around four net Boone and Crockett deer that have ever made the national book. That
Oh,
have made the record book. So we don't have really big antlers here, but we have very crafty older mature deer because they get hunted so much. Our rifle season comes in August 15th. It goes all the way to January 1st, and you can
oh
shoot
wow.
5 bucks. Yeah, you can shoot 5 bucks in our state. So they get hunted really, really hard. So you learn a lot about how they avoid people and how they navigate different terrains here in South Carolina, and you're able to take that education and go to different parts of the country and use that. So, for here in South Carolina, for example, there is a buck that I have been aware of since really 3 years ago is when I found the deer, like you said, on my trail cameras. And I didn't really hunt him that year because I only thought he was a 3 year old. And normally we like to wait for them to get 4 or 5 before we go after them because that's when they maximize their antler growth. And so that's we want to let them, especially if they're a 10, 11, 12 points, something like that. You guys would say 4x4s or 5x5s. We us boys in the South, we count all the points. So
Yeah,
you
I
know
usually say like 10 point, 8 point, and then when I came out here, I was like, "What do you mean a 4x4? It sounds like a car."
yeah, right, exactly. So 12 point, we try to maximize and let them breed as much as they can when they've got good genetics like that, and then look at 5 years old as the time to really hunt them. And I did hunt him some last year, and of course he outsmarted me last year. I never saw him. Only got a couple of daylight trail camera pictures of that deer. Actually, today we went in and filmed a rut funnel setup that we put together, or I put together, to hunt him later in October, and we're going to break all that down. But so that's a buck in South Carolina, and he probably would score in that 135 range. And if I
Mm-hmm.
talk to my buddies in Illinois or Kansas,
They're laughing
they
at it.
don't bat an eye. I mean, if the deer's not over 160 inches, they just delete the trail camera picture. So it's really relative and different depending on what part of the country you're in.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. I know I have a buddy, and why I was out in Iowa earlier in the year, I've got a buddy in Iowa, and we had even gone shed hunting that weekend that I was out there. And there was a buck that he had been hunting that season that we ended up finding its deadhead. And to me, like seeing that even just the deadhead in person, I was like, holy crap, this thing is incredibly massive. But you hear about those Midwest whitetail, and they're some of the biggest that you can find.
They really are. World class deer. Really from that Alberta all the way down. Oklahoma, Kansas, Illinois. All of that, Iowa, obviously Missouri, Indiana, Ohio. All of those states have got tremendous deer. And when I was little, I never really got to experience that. My dad didn't travel a whole lot. We just kind of stayed home and did our own thing here in South Carolina and Georgia. And eventually, when I got a little older, I made some connections out there and actually went to Illinois on my first kind of out-of-state trip and hunted some public land out there. And yeah, it was just the fire burned hotter and hotter, getting into those type animals and being able to hunt some serious bucks.
Nice. Yeah. Do you hunt mostly public land in South Carolina, private land, or a little bit of both?
So right now, I've got a hunting club that I'm a member of. You pay it's a lease. The whole club went into this timber property and leased it, and there's 12 members of the club. And then I have permission on my best friend's family owns a really big tract on the Congaree River, and they mostly manage that for turkeys and waterfowl. And so he lets me hunt that place. So that's kind of my what I do. I hunt that club and then I hunt that farm. So very, very fortunate to be able to hunt those two properties.
Nice. Yeah. That's awesome. And then as far as like starting Asio and having camo that is geared specifically to the whitetail hunter, and even kind of like you mentioned, more specifically to the bow hunting whitetail hunter, what goes into, I think for me, like starting out hunting, I just looked at camo as like what camo pattern is my favorite to look at, right? Like not even having an understanding of how different camo patterns do look in different settings. Like if you're in thick timber, you want darker colors. I have in Arizona, I was hunting in Arizona, and I found that like the plain desert colors blended in really well with the terrain that I was in out there. But if you're in South Carolina and thicker trees and woods, like that camo is going to look differently. So what kind of goes into the camo for the whitetail hunter?
Yeah, so I mentioned this a little bit earlier that I've done quite a bit of mountain hunting, and
Mm-hmm.
in that process, I finally got exposed to some really high end premium hunting clothes.
Mm-hmm.
When I was growing up, I looked like the Michelin Man when it would get to be 25 degrees. I would have 45 different layers on. I could hardly move my arms. And then, when you started doing some mountain hunts and you got introduced to like windstopper fabric and stuff that would dry very quickly. And I was blown away. I just could not believe the quality of that stuff. And I always thought, I said, this stuff works really good in the mountains. It's a little bit loud. When you're bow hunting whitetail, they're very close, and you've got to be super, super quiet, and you've got to have gear that's very quiet. So that kind of Western stuff was geared more to that mountain hunting where you're going to be further away. Obviously, if you're elk hunting, a lot of those bulls get in close, but whitetail are super, super spooky, and
Mm-hmm.
they can, I mean, they all can hear very well, but the name of the game is being ultra quiet. And then the camo patterns, most of those technical garments at the time were made for the Western camo and the terrain that they're going to be in. And so I thought, if I could ever get a camo pattern that really made sense for us whitetail hunters, that would work well in the trees, that I think that's a gap. That's something that's missing in our industry. And I've told this story 50 times, and if you've heard it, I'm sorry, but you know what we looked at is I was going to pull up a set of deer stands in October back in 2018, 2019, and two great horned owls got in a fight, and one of them flew into a tree and just vanished. And I got to thinking about that. I was like, I think maybe the industry has overthought the camo. I mean, these ambush type predators, they've been doing this successfully for thousands of years. The camo that they have, and so I thought, from a natural perspective, an owl, will go after squirrels, rabbits, mice. A bobcat, maybe he's going after rabbits and fawns. A mountain lion after deer. You expand that even further to snow leopards or a leopard in Africa or lions in Africa, and you look at how they blend in their environment and how those ambush type predators hunt. They have to get super close to the same type game that we're hunting, and nature
Mm-hmm.
didn't build those camo patterns for human eyesight. They build it for what the prey animals are seeing. And
Mm-hmm.
so for me, we went kind of a different route on our camo and created ambush type natural predator camo. And it's worked. When we finally got it dialed and went and compared it to some of the others that are out there, and then actually got it into the trees and started hunting out of it. I mean, the feedback just has rolled in year after year after year about, oh my God. I mean, I'm able to draw my bow, and things I could never get away with before, I can get away with now. Now, I'm not going to argue with somebody. You can go out and kill a whitetail deer or an elk or whatever it may be in blue jeans and a plaid shirt. Guys did that years and years ago, right? Right. And it still works today. But where really good camo comes in is for the guy that's looking for those little incremental improvements
Mm-hmm.
where they can get away with moving on a perfectly still morning, or they can draw their bow when there's 4 or 5 animals around them, and they've got to blend in, and they've got to stay almost invisible, if you will. So that's what we've done is fill that gap and taken real premium fabrics, great cut and sew, and good designs, and added a camo pattern that works well in the entire whitetail range.
Yeah, and even like I have just one of the jackets, and the material of it, kind of like you mentioned, the ability to move. I think something that I've tried a few different brands of camo, and yeah, while I'm like hiking and bow hiking, we'll call it, or walking around the woods or whatever, it's fine. But then, like, if I actually wear that and I try to draw back my bow in it, like sometimes the clothing is limited, whether it's maybe it's a little bit thicker, so then when I'm anchoring at full draw, maybe the hood is in the way, and like that becomes a problem with it being like a thicker material, or it's not like as flexible as a material. So I know like with the jacket that I have and the material that you use, I feel like I can do any sort of movement in it, and it's not limiting at all. And people will say, there's you can't ever find the perfect piece of hunting clothing, especially for ladies and for women. Like, because there is so little out there, people are like, I have a pair of pants that I love, but they're extremely loud. And someone's like, well, you can't have everything. And I'm like, well, but the goal is to have everything. And I
Yes.
think that companies want to do that, but it just maybe, especially some of the bigger companies, they don't have the ability to maybe do that. So that's kind of where maybe even you have an advantage being out, like starting smaller, and you've grown quite a bit even in the year that I've known you, but you can really take that feedback and make those changes right away versus having those changes be made like a couple of years down.
Yeah, I think we try and stay on top of the market and the demographics, and one of the main influxes into the bow hunting side of things is ladies. We're seeing a lot of ladies come into the bow hunting lifestyle or bow hunting sport, and we want to accommodate that. The issue that I'm sure everybody that's listening and yourself has heard is that you have minimum quantities when you develop this stuff. So
Yeah.
we'll use round numbers. You've got about 1,500 jackets, or for some of these bigger companies, it's 15,000 jackets,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yeah.
And if you go across your whole line of SKUs, it might be 40 different SKUs that when you develop the ladies line, you might have 40 SKUs of 1,000 garments in each SKU. And so you've got to have a real presence in the ladies market to
Yeah.
be able to not leave all that stuff on the shelves. And so a smaller company, as they come on board, they've got to be very cognizant of inventory, because that's basically cash, sitting on shelves, and you've got to sell that stuff out. But what happens is you get to a point, and we're really getting close to that, to where you have enough brand awareness and you have enough Whitneys out there that can promote your brand for you, and so it makes a lot of sense for us to look into that a lot more serious, and to get something going, because we want to accommodate as many hunters as we can, because that's our passion. I mean,
Right.
the bow hunting is our passion, and that's we want to accommodate as many folks as we possibly can.
Yeah, and I think like one specific brand that comes to mind, and I'm not gonna like throw names out there, but they had created like a women's line, and even just someone told me the other day, and it's a pair of pants that I love, but they had went to go look for them, and they're like, women's pants don't even exist there anymore. Like they just have men's stuff, and I was like, it's interesting, but to your point, it makes sense if they weren't selling them, if they had bought so many of them or made so many of them up front, and it maybe took however longer than they expected for them to profit or sell those, then maybe it's not worth creating more, or at least not right away. And kind of to your point, like even starting a new brand altogether, like you said, you didn't even have smalls to start with, but it's a business point, right? Like you've got to sell what you're creating. And so now that you are seeing more women like creating smalls, and the women can buy smalls, and then as those start to go off the shelves and you get rid of those, then it's like, okay, now it's time for the women's line. But I do get where even if it is a major company, if they put so much of like the women's stuff out there and it never sells off the shelves, and it's like, well, what did we do? What was this even worth it?
Yeah, and I think in our part of the industry, if you will, the whitetail market is the largest. So we have a
Yeah.
much better chance of having more ladies on board, because it is a bigger part of the market. I have no idea what the mountain hunting lady market is, but I would think that is fairly small. And I would think that the whitetail side of it would be tenfold that. So we are in the right industry, or part of the industry, to be able to bring in a ladies line, and I think it'll be successful. I really do.
Yeah, no, I would agree. And yeah, to your point, like the mountain hunting, it is, yes, women are growing in it. But yeah, I think a lot of the women that I meet who are growing or being introduced to hunting, they're new to it, are out east, and they obviously have more opportunity for it, which is like another conversation. Of you mentioned in South Carolina, you guys get 5 buck tags, and Colorado, you're to if you want to hunt deer, it's draw only. So if you don't draw a deer tag that year, maybe you can get one in the leftovers. And if even then, you can't hunt deer that year if you don't get one in the leftover, and if you don't draw your elk tag. So I coming out to Colorado, the draw system, learning the draw system out west was a huge mind fuck to me. Because same in
Yeah.
Texas, you can get it's five. I think it's 5 or 6 tags total. You get like 3 buck tags and then like 2 or 3 antlerless tags. So even like there's more opportunity for not even just women, but for new hunters in general to hunt whitetail, because if you're in those eastern states, whether it's northeast or southeast, you get way more tags that you can spend in these clothes, putting time in them hunting deer.
For sure, without a doubt. And it is getting harder and harder to draw in some of these other states. Kansas used to be something you could draw every year, and now it's a 50-50 draw. Iowa is very hard to draw. But and then the elk and stuff. I mean, New Mexico, I've hunted elk there, and it's not good draw odds there. Colorado is for non-residents is really tough now. So it is getting a little harder and harder to get drawn. Whereas a lot of the stuff, like you said, back east, non-residents can come right in here and get 2 or 3 tags if they want them and do their thing.
Yeah, I'm still a Texas resident for that reason. Because like
I don't
last year,
blame you.
first season out here in Colorado, I had an over the count. I drew a bear tag and then had an over the counter elk tag, and didn't fill either. So come October, when bow season opened up, I was heading right down south back to Texas. And like I said, I knew enough people that I was like, all right, I got to fill the freezer. So I'm just looking for some freezer filler hunts out here, and filled my doe tags, and then came right back to Colorado.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I love y'all state. Texas is incredible. I would move there. I would move to South Texas, down south of San Antonio in a minute, like around that Three Rivers, George West area,
Mm-hmm.
that Nueces River. There's a ton of history there, and I just love those brush bucks. Those cactus bucks that come through there with those chocolate horns. I look forward to hunting there every single year, and I could definitely see myself retiring or moving to Texas at some point.
Yeah, Texas is nice. The only thing, especially like, yeah, I'm from the like I grew up outside of Dallas, but then I spent a couple years working in the San Antonio, South Texas area, and that was where I started hunting. And I always said when I left Texas the first time that that was the only place that I would go back to. Because just the hill country is beautiful. It's so nice out there, and even from a hunting perspective, like it's definitely the best part of the state to be in. And you can hunt year round in Texas, right? Like I came to Colorado and I meet people who are like September only elk hunters, and they don't hunt any other time of the year except for September. And once they fill that elk tag, they're done for the year. And I'm like, that doesn't sound like fun to me. Like I'm
Right.
coming from a place where like if it's not whitetail season, you can at least hunt hogs. And if you
Right.
know people, you can hunt exotics too. So the goal for me, no matter where I'm at, is like how frequently can I hunt throughout the year? I'm not interested in just being in a place or people who only hunt every 4 years because they only want to hunt draw units. They don't like hunting over the counter. I'm like, that's not what I want to do. I'd rather be, if I'm not somewhere where I can hunt year round, I'm definitely going to find opportunities to go places where I can hunt year round.
100%. I think I could hunt every single day. I love it, and try to do it as much as I possibly can. It seems like the more I do it, the more I want to do it, and it's special. It's a great lifestyle, and I embrace it and encourage as many people to do it as possible.
Yeah, I would agree. And you had mentioned, I think maybe when you alluded to it early on in the conversation, but last time we spoke when I saw you in Iowa, kind of how you've gotten out and hunted all of these different places and even internationally as well. Did you say you worked like with an outfitter or like an outfitter service, and kind of working with all these places? Um,
Yeah, so I started a business when I got out of college called Sporting Adventures International, and it's still in existence today.
mhm,
And we were basically a booking agent is exactly
mhm,
what we were. We focused on Africa and Argentina, but we would do some elk hunts. I leased a ranch in Three Rivers that we did some whitetail hunts
yeah,
on, and I eventually ended up going to Africa, and I worked over there for 7 years. I got my professional hunter's license. Eventually, I did an apprenticeship that lasted 5 years, and then I did 2 years of fully guiding where I worked in Mozambique, and that was a lot of fun. And I love Africa. It's an outdoorsman's paradise. I mean, you're
mhm,
talking about hunting year round, and you know, not hundreds, but lots and lots of different species to hunt. That's an incredible place. I mean, whether you're a bow hunter or a rifle hunter, and I'm sure some of your listeners have been, and will back me up on that, but it really is a special, special place. And yeah, I mentioned earlier I could live in Texas. I definitely could live in Africa. I would
yeah.
have no problem tomorrow moving to Botswana in the Kalahari and running a bow hunting operation over there. I just think that would be incredible. The financial side of that's not going to be too great, but the lifestyle would be
Yeah.
just incredible. It would be incredible.
Yeah, that's what I hear. I'm going in April to, and I'm blanking on the name of the outfitter. So it's one of those like Instagram hunt giveaways. A friend of mine had won it, and I had tagged him in it before he found it. So when I saw that he won, I was like, "You better take me with you," because you wouldn't have found out about this if it wasn't for me. So I'm stoked to go, and obviously we'll get to add on anything that we want to add on. But honestly, before I had had multiple conversations with people about hunting in Africa, I had just kind of seen it as, I got into hunting to put meat on the table. And so when I heard that if you went to Africa, you couldn't bring the meat back, I was like, that's pointless. I have no desire to go. Like if it's just strictly like hunting for antlers, and that's not what I want to do. But then I kind of would just ask around and ask people who had been out there, and even people who frequented there, and you could probably even speak to it yourself, is that it's still conservation over there. And it's not like the meat is just getting thrown in the trash can. Oftentimes they are giving it to local communities and stuff like that. But I think my first perspective of it was like, that's literally just going over there and killing, and that's not what I want to do. But yeah, the curious person in me wanted to learn, like, why do people keep going to Africa and hunting? And so I'm actually, yeah, I'm really stoked to go, and I have a feeling it won't be my last time after I go.
No, what country are you going to? Is it South
We'll be,
Africa?
yep, mm-hmm, so,
Gotcha. Yeah, so from a meat perspective, you have wild game or normally have wild game from what you shot, every single night and
mhm.
even during lunch sometimes. So you're constantly eating wild game while you're over there. And yes, every bit of protein is used over there. There is absolutely nothing that gets wasted. The local communities, the schools, the hospitals, the local villages, all of that gets consumed. South Africa, and I'm sure you're aware of this, is a lot. Commercial's the wrong word for it, but it reminds me a little bit more of South Texas. There's favorite. When my first vision when I went over there, and my first time over was in 1999, and I had watched the movie Out of Africa, and I'm thinking it's going to be that. That's what I'm thinking in my mind. And I've seen quite a few videos, and Peter Capstick, he's a guy that wrote a lot of books. Um, I can't remember off the top of my head. Death in the Long Grass, I think, is one of his most famous books. It's really good. And I'd read those books, and he had come out with a series of videos that I'd watched, and it was all Botswana, Tanzania, real wild old Africa settings. And when I flew into South Africa, we were driving on toll roads. There's a lot of fences, and so not that it ruined the experience. It's just not what I had expected. And then, but
Yeah,
once you get into the bush and you get away from the roads and away from the cities, it is Africa. I think you have to have a perspective of what you're getting into. And
for
and I,
sure.
I hunted South Africa. I bow hunted South Africa this year. I bow hunted South Africa last year, and love it. It's a bow hunting paradise. There's lots of animals, and especially with you going in April, that'll be the kudu rut. They'll be April, May, depending on where you are. The kudu will be starting to rut or in full rut, and you talking about something that's neat. That's a lot of fun. Those big bulls, they have 50, 55, all the way up to 60-inch long horns, and their necks get as big as 50-gallon drums, and they're
Yeah.
following the cows. And yeah, so definitely take your bow.
Yeah, that's it's funny you bring up, like, I think most people want to go to Africa for the big kudu hunt, and I keep, like, a buddy of mine keeps joking, like, I haven't put that on my like list of things that I want to get yet. And he's like, I'm telling you, the second you see one, you're gonna want to go after it. And I'm like, I know it, but I'm trying to like put off the fact that I actually want to as long as possible. Because I just have a feeling as soon as I forget, there's two that are included in the giveaway, but we added a couple extra days so that we could include a couple more animals if we wanted to. And I just feel like I'm just gonna say goodbye to my wallet and just like
Yes.
we'll do. It doesn't
Yeah.
matter. Money doesn't matter when I'm there.
send it. You got to do it. You got to do it, and you'll pay your trophy fees. But then the taxidermist, you don't have to deal with that for a year, so you got plenty of time to replenish the pocketbook and the bank account. So yeah,
Yeah.
my advice is write the check always. Yep.
Yeah, that's my advice to other people. I'm really good at spending other people's money. Like just go do it. Like you'll never
Yeah.
get that time back. You'll never get that money back. So just go do it. So now is the time for me to take my own advice, and I imagine, yeah, I'll have a lot of fun. And once the big old kudu walks in front of me, yeah, it's probably
Yes.
game on after that.
I would think so. Absolutely.
Where is your, so yeah, you've kind of been to all these different places and you mentioned you really liked hunting Africa. Where is your favorite place that you've ever hunted?
Favorite place, non-whitetail, I guess.
Yes, right, yeah.
Yeah, non-whitetail. Well, Africa. If you said you can only hunt one country or one place, it would definitely be Africa. That
Mhm.
would be number one. But if we took that out, I really, really, really enjoyed Alaska. I hunted in the Wrangell Mountains for Dall sheep and mountain goat, and it was probably the most difficult hunting I've ever done in my life. Well, it definitely was. We were hunting across glaciers and in some of the roughest terrain in the world, and had really heavy packs. Thank goodness we were successful on Dall sheep and mountain goat. But
Nice.
that country is is amazing. It's beautiful. It humbles you as to how insignificant you really are. When you get up there and you start battling those elements and that terrain, you realize how insignificant we really are. I think as Americans, we all think how important individually we are, and when you get into some of those mountain terrain, even the Mackenzie Mountains in the Northwest Territory, and you just look and you see how far things are and how big the country and the world is, it's very humbling.
Yeah, I think that's one of my favorite parts about like the mountains specifically, but anywhere, like even if you're on the ocean side and you can see for miles and miles, to be like humbled by the land that we live on. Whether it's yeah, like climbing a mountain and I'm just like totally getting my shit kicked in and I'm to the top of the mountain and I'm like, wow, there's so much out there that we can't see from the comfort of our own homes. But that's what's been cool about hunting is I've found myself in places that I would have never found myself if I wasn't chasing an animal. Like most times people aren't going to go get lost in the woods off the beaten path for no reason other than maybe if you're a little crazy. But if you're hunting an animal, that's what you have to do. And
Yeah.
so I think yeah, hunting outside of like the harvesting an animal part of it, just the chase of an animal and the places that you go for that and the terrain that you have to go through for that. Like there was a spot that we camped at last year during elk season, and I was like, man, it's unaccessible by just normal trails. And I'm sitting there like, man, if it wasn't for hunting, I would have never seen this spot in my entire life. And it was so cool to like have that thought and that experience.
Yeah, and another thing is the people you meet. I look at, I'm sure you have it too, but the WhatsApp Messenger, and most of
Mm-hmm.
the guys that are international, they love the WhatsApp thing, and
Mm-hmm.
some of the best friendships that I've made are guys that don't really speak English. Very very little English do they speak. They have the Google Translator or whatever, but I talk with them if not daily, at least once a week. And these are guides from Mongolia or Kyrgyzstan, or Pakistan. Guys that it's just amazing when you get into. It doesn't matter where you go. You, when you meet another hunter, you instantly have a bond and a connection, whether you speak the language or not. And that can be in Africa in the Kalahari with the Bushmen, or it can be in Mongolia, with some of the herdsmen and nomads over there that love to hunt. There's a bond that's created no matter what socioeconomic level you're at, or what part of the country you're in. Hunters are hunters, and to me, it becomes a real special bond when you can meet people in
Mhm.
different cultures and have that bond and continue that relationship. So some of the best people in the world I've met has been through hunting.
Yeah, I was having a conversation with someone earlier. Funny that you say that. Along the lines of something similar, is I think that the shared commonality is that we all enjoy the chase of like something challenging, right? Like it's never guaranteed, especially not that rifle hunting is guaranteed, but especially as a bow hunter, like it's never guaranteed that you're going to harvest something at any given day or in any given hunt that you're on. But nonetheless, we still continue to show up time and time and time again because of the possibility that we could be successful. So I think it's this shared camaraderie of like we enjoy something that's challenging, we enjoy the chase of something. And I think that like we all just have that same understanding. We meet other hunters and we all just kind of know. It's like the little like head nod that you can give every hunter that you meet. Like, okay, you enjoy not just the same things, but things that maybe aren't easy that other people aren't pursuing.
Yeah, I mean, well, here's a prime example. You and I are on this podcast together. We met through hunting. I mean,
Yeah.
it's neat, right? It's neat. It's a great experience that brings people together, and it's special.
Yeah, I've met so many incredible people, and of course, there's bad people everywhere you go, but for the most part, I think everyone that I've met has been incredibly nice and willing to help, and it's awesome when I meet someone like you or anyone else who's been hunting most or all of their lives. And I share that I'm relatively new to it and that I'm learning and open to all the information that they have to share and any education that they're willing to give. And the number of people who will just like spill as much as they know as they possibly can is, I love it about this population. It's been super cool.
Yeah, I mean, you're quite a shot now. I follow your Instagram obviously and your story and see you going to all these tack events and I mean, you've become an absolute Robin Hood with that bow, hadn't you?
Yeah, well, I started like with a bow, and I only shot like I would shoot indoors at targets and then at 3D targets for the first like year and a half before I ever went hunting. Obviously, I got into archery with the intent to hunt, but I wanted to be good at it before I ever sent an arrow at a critter. So like at the root of bow hunting for me is archery and shooting at 3D targets and just shooting for fun. And kind of in that too, when I first started, like archery became, I don't know, like I don't want to say it was like a getaway because I don't only ever shoot my bow when I'm upset or anything. Like I love shooting my bow all the time, but I think the process of being good at archery requires so much commitment and so much mental commitment, like not just a time commitment, but a mental commitment as well. That you just have to be so dialed in. And I think there's something like a greater appreciation that I have for the process of being good at it. And I always try to set aside like 20 minutes a day to just shoot like anywhere from 5 to 20 arrows a day, just because it gets my mind off of everything else. And to have, and you know this as well as anyone else who's listening that shoots a bow, to have a good shot, you have got to be dialed in to, from every step of that. To the second you knock an arrow, you're at full draw to the second you release it. If you're not dialed in, that arrow oftentimes is not going where you want it to go. And so it's been, yeah, that. And then also just like, yeah, the community that I've built from it. Like I like traveling to shoot with friends and I've met friends all across the country through archery itself. And then going to the different total archery challenges. Like that's just how I spend my summers now is just traveling to all these events and shooting. And that's been fun too. Even most people that are at these events are hunters as well, but you come across quite a few also who only like to shoot their bow and they don't have any interest in hunting.
Yeah, it is. It's a great community, and you're right. I mean, I have started down the terrible rabbit hole of traditional or recurve shooting.
I saw.
Uh, oh my gosh! And you talking about having to be focused. I mean, I'll put 20 yards. You take your compound bow and you can shoot a thumbnail group with 3 arrows if you're dialed in.
Mhm.
And with traditional 20 yards, I mean, at first can I hit the target? right? Can I even hit the target?
Uh-huh.
And then it got to, can I put arrows in the vitals, standing there, perfect form. And then, you get a little cocky and you put two in there that are, and I think I posted something the other morning. I'd put two, just right in the 10 ring. And I actually went up and filmed it. And the third arrow literally hit it in the tail. It all, I mean, I missed the spot by not inches, but by feet of
Mm-hmm.
where I was aiming, and I just took my mind off of it because the first two had gone right where they were supposed to. But that is something that I am really fired up to try this year, and want to. We've got lots of targets of opportunity here in South Carolina, so we've got a lot of hog, we've got a lot of deer tags. So, and we start in 2 weeks. August 15th is our opener, so we can get started. So I'm going to try. I've still got some work to do to build out my system, and I've got a little tower here in the back of our office that I can shoot out of. And if I
Mm-hmm.
can get to where I can keep from hitting one in the tail or in the butt, I'm going to give it a try.
Yeah, I think it's funny you say that. I had injured my shoulder like 2 years ago, to the point, and it was my draw arm, and I couldn't draw back my bow. And I didn't want to stop shooting, but I also didn't want to get a new bow that had lower limb poundage. So the shop that I was shooting out of in Texas at the time, they would let me borrow a recurve. And I started with a 20-pound recurve, and then I worked up to a 30-pound, and then I worked up to a 40-pound, eventually to where I was back to shooting my bow again. But I will never forget the first time I went to pull back that recurve, and the target was at 10 yards in front of me, and I missed the target. And I was
Yes,
like, 10 yards? Are we serious? What just happened?
it's wild, and you see guys that are successful with it. We go to a lot of trade shows, and
Yeah.
that's basically what we're dealing with every trade show is or whitetail hunters. That's the big thing. Guys obviously that we're talking to, and a lot. I don't know if it's a trend or if I'm just getting exposed to more and more people, but a lot of guys are shooting traditional recurves and longbows, and you start following these guys, and there are guys that are really good with it, and they're shooting elk and they're shooting deer and they're good with it. And man, that is aspirational as can be, and something to strive for. And we'll see. I mean, the old saying is the struggle stick, and it definitely is that.
Yeah, my friend that I had introduced you to when I was in Iowa, he's a professional barebow shooter. And just to like watch someone be that good at with a stick and a bow is just mind blowing to me. To compete at such a high level, but he regularly hunts with a barebow also. So I'm like, God, it's yeah, inspiring because, like you said, there is mental effort that goes into shooting a compound bow, but there's a whole new level of mental effort that goes into shooting a recurve. And I think kind of like you've been doing, like you said, you've been practicing with it for months now. So to go out this season, you have a little bit of confidence under you, but it is not, I would see in Texas oftentimes I'd be in the bow shop and guys would come in and they've never shot a bow a day in their life, and they're getting their first bow, they get their 20 dialed in, and then their first hunt is tomorrow. And I'm like, I guess with a compound bow you can do that because you can get it dialed in, and if you have the basics, hopefully at 20, I mean most deer you're shooting in Texas from a ground blind are 20 to 30 yards anyways.
Yeah.
So I'm like, okay, that makes sense. But you can't do that with a recurve. You cannot pick up a recurve and go send an arrow at an animal the next day, or that will not end well for you.
No, no, it will not end well. It may not end well for the animal either. But yeah, it's
Yeah, for
it's
sure.
a lot of it's a lot of effort, and I'm kind of I'm thinking do some whitetail stuff here in South Carolina, maybe do something in Texas with it, and then
Mm-hmm.
probably maybe a bear up in Saskatchewan. Do I know we talked about that bear hunt, but
Mm-hmm.
they kill some monsters up there, and I went up year before last and shot a big one, and then filmed my buddy Rick shoot at another one. He actually missed the bear, unfortunately. He was new to bow hunting, but I think you could do it up there with a recurve. You know, a lot of those shots are that 15-yard
Really?
mark, and you know, I think you could shoot a big bear with one. So I'm anxious to get back up there and try that again. And it's a good time of year too. You know, spring bear hunt is a great time to be up there.
Yeah, no, I think that would be awesome. I'm curious, hunting with a recurve, would you change, especially on whitetail, would you change any of your tactics?
For bear or oh, you're talking
For
about
whitetail.
changing tactics. Oh yeah, from a recurve to, I mean, from a compound to a recurve. I think where it really becomes different is that I'm going to have to obviously get closer. Most of the stand sites that I set up now are that 25 to 35 yard range, you know, ranges
Mm-hmm.
that I can cover, and so it's gonna require me to get to that inside of 20, which is
Mm-hmm.
exciting. You know, getting them that close and relaxed environments. You know, a lot of the food plots and stuff like that they put in when these more mature animals get into that type setting, they're really keyed up. And you know that you hear them talk about jumping the string. You know, whitetails jumping the string and ducking the arrow. And with a recurve, you've got to be even more cognizant of that. They are
Mm-hmm.
quieter, but still the movement of the arrow, the noise of the arrow, and the bow going off. So I think I'm going to be setting up my spots a lot more in transition zones where they're
Mm-hmm.
going from maybe bedding to food and are a little more relaxed than when they actually get on the X and they're on the food and they're more keyed up, and that's where you know they get hunted a lot. So that you know get more in the thickets, more in the tighter areas, and see if you can get one sneaking through there that's not you know all keyed up. So that'll be what I'll try this year.
Yeah, that'd be sweet. And how incredible to like have that feeling of you just harvested a deer with a recurve. Like I'm stoked for you, and I hope that you get to because yeah, I think that'll be awesome. Do you hunt more from a tree stand or from a ground blind, or do you do a mix of the two? Or
Most everywhere is out of tree stands
Mhm.
except for Texas. I'll do ground blinds in
Okay.
Texas and a lot of brush blinds. So yeah, most everything, Kansas, Illinois. You know, every now and again there'll be a ground blind scenario where there aren't trees and you need to cover a particular draw or something in that prairie land in Kansas. But most, I would say, 95% of what I do whitetail hunting is tree stand, and then Texas, Mexico, you get more into the ground blinds or some of those like tower type stands, which is a little bit
Mhm.
you know a different animal, but you're very well. That's just kind of how they do it in Texas.
Yeah, it's so much different there than anywhere else, and not just with hunting. Like I feel like Texas is its own world, and anytime I like talk to someone in another state who's from Texas, they all agree that nobody loves Texas more than Texans,
Yeah,
because it's
yeah,
just
you're
like
right.
that's really it's its own place down there. But that's the one thing that I haven't done is tree stand hunting because, like I said, in Texas it's mostly ground blind hunting, and then coming out west, it's been spot and stock or still hunting. And so hunting from a tree stand is like the one thing that I want to add to my list. But yeah, I think anyone that I've talked to who is an avid whitetail hunter who's in the Midwest or out east, it has sounds like most people are tree stand hunting for that.
Yeah, it's a crazy huge, you know, click these mobile hunter. You know, like this past weekend we were at a mobile hunter um, expo, and
Mhm.
everybody there, it was like just the tree stand, the saddle hunters, and you know the
Mhm.
climbing sticks and the platforms and the saddles, and you know that was the whole. I mean, there was thousands of people there, and that's you know, that's foreign to Western guys. You know, if you talk to Western guys about a saddle and a tree stand platform, there. I mean, other than maybe you know New Mexico, if they're sitting over a water hole or something like
Mhm.
that, you know they can get up in a tree stand, but that's very foreign and it's a different world.
Yeah, I have talked to some, and by some I mean literally two guys that I know who kind of like to do both. Right? Maybe they have their trail cameras out, or it's an area that they've hunted year after year, so they're very familiar with it. And they throw in a little bit of the tree stand hunting. And they like I know one guy who has a tree stand that he keeps up year after year. It's near a wallow, near water. There's a trail cam nearby. So it's really just one of those things that he utilizes if he's seeing game on the camera consistently. But I think to go out and to learn all these different styles of hunting, and you can probably even attest to this, like you are a whitetail hunter, but you've hunted all these different game, and I'm sure that makes you a better whitetail hunter because of it. Versus if you only ever hunt one thing forever and you never learn different ways of hunting these other game, then you're only really, you can still be really good at it, but you don't learn different tactics that maybe could make you better.
Oh, I think being well rounded is super important. There's fundamentals and there's things that you learn whitetail hunting that just won't apply, and then some that do completely apply to elk hunting.
Mm-hmm.
I grew up whitetail hunting, and not to, I don't know that this is an arrogant thing or not, but I went on my first elk hunt in Ironside, Oregon. I saved up, for like 3 summers working, and I was able to go on a private land elk hunt, and it was a 60,000 acre ranch this guy owned, and I played baseball in college, so I was in good shape, and this was like my last year of college, and was out there, and we hunted for 5 days, and we saw bulls every single day, and we just never could get one to come in. They were herded up. The big bull was with the cows. We couldn't call them away, and the guys were a little bit, in my mind, timid. They wouldn't like try and get in on the herd. And then the last morning of the hunt, we again a big herd bull with a couple small satellite bulls, and we called, and we got to like 100 yards, and then the big bull took the cows, and he started going up the mountain into the timber, and the guide looked at me, and he said, Joe, I'm sorry to say our hunt's over, and I said, well, would you mind if I tried to catch them, because we haven't done anything really aggressive, and I was like, we've just done the same thing over and over and over again. And having whitetail hunted, when you do that, when you do the same thing over and over again and it's not working, try something different. And he's
Mm-hmm.
like, no, you have at it. So I literally got my quiver, dropped my pack. I had my quiver, my bow, and I just took off up the mountain after them. And I got up in the edge of the timber, and I'd never elk hunted, didn't know much about it. And I heard this just god awful noise. It sounded like hogs in water. And I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
what is going on? And it was just right there. And I went over this just tiny little hill, and I could see the tips of the bull's horns, and he was in a wallow. And I could just see his horns just going crazy in this wallow. And he walked out of it, and he was 25 yards away,
Mm-hmm.
perfectly broadside, looking up the mountain. And I drew my bow, and when I drew, he kind of caught movement out of the corner of his eye, and he looked back at me real sharp. And this is where whitetail hunting hurt me, because I was like, okay,
Mm-hmm.
he's going to jump the string. He's looking right at me. So I aimed low, and I shot, and I never will forget the arrow. It just went, and it glanced off of his brisket, and he turned and ran up the mountain. Well, the guy that I was hunting with came up there, and he's like, well, what happened? I said, well, I shot him. And he said, you did not. You didn't run that herd of elk down. And I was like, yeah, I did. I mean, I didn't run him down. I just got up there to him, and he was in the wallow. And went got my arrow, and it had hair on it, and we could actually see the bull through a spotting scope with his cows going up the mountain. So they were gone. And went back, and we told the ranch owner all that, and he called me about 3 months later and said, hey, would you like to come out here and guide? We'd love for you to be a guide. And I said, man, I don't know anything about calling elk. I don't know.
Yeah.
He said, I can teach you all of that. He said, I think you've got the hunting instincts, if you will, to be able to do that. And I equate that to growing up, whitetail hunting.
Mm-hmm.
And so I ended up actually working for that guy for 3 seasons, and he paid me $100 a day, and I got to hunt an elk or a mule deer each season on his ranch. So yeah, it worked out. It worked out really, really good. In between hunters, I got to hunt either elk or mule deer, and so that was a real fun time in my life of hunting. So, just I guess back to the point is that what we learn in different environments can absolutely be equated and moved over to different types of hunting.
Yeah, I've even like I know a couple people who have been in Colorado elk hunting 5, 6 years now, and kind of a similar but opposite story of yours is they haven't been successful because they've done the same thing year after year after year. And me coming in first season, I'm willing to try everything, right? So I'm like, all right, this day this didn't work, so let's try something new tomorrow. And my buddy's looking at me like, why? I'm like, well, this didn't work yesterday, so why would we do the same thing again? Like, that's just
Yeah.
how I am in life. If it didn't work today, I'm trying something different tomorrow. Like, you got to do something different. Maybe you go with different people. Maybe you do a different tactic, but you can't do the same thing all the time. It doesn't always work, especially if it doesn't work. I don't know why you would try it again if it didn't work the first four or
Right.
five times.
Yeah.
But yeah, this has been awesome. We're coming up on an hour here, and I don't want to keep you too long. But I end all of my episodes asking my guest, what does wild strength mean to you, or what comes to your mind when you think of wild strength?
Yeah, I knew you were going to ask me this because I've watched some of your podcasts and I
Okay.
have thought about it. And
Okay.
this this may be strange, and that's okay. But I never will forget. I did CrossFit real heavy for probably 3 years,
Mhm.
and I ended up blowing my back out, so I had to quit doing it. But the point being, there was an instructor there that kept everybody grounded, and he told us, he said, "Do you know what a paleo man would do to you if you encountered one when you were out hunting?" He said he would run over the mountain with his club and grab your wife or girlfriend or whatever. He would pick her up over his shoulder and he would run off with her, and there would be absolutely nothing you could do about it. You could not keep up with him. You could not catch him. Times have changed, and yeah, you can do 100 burpees for time, or run 800-meter sprints and all that, but real wild strength is something I think that's kind of lost. And when you
Mhm.
when you put it into perspective, and you get up in the Wrangell Mountains again, that's where you see wild strength and the ability to pack out a mountain goat or pack out a Dall sheep through a glacier that's maybe 3 or 4 stories high, and you're up and down with crampons, and just, I guess the answer to the question, what is wild strength to me, is we don't have it now, right? We don't have wild strength. The paleo man had wild strength, but we can
Yeah.
certainly work towards it, and try and get there. But that's what it means to me, is I guess something to really strive for, and stay humble in what we do, and to know that there was a time when people really did have wild
Mhm.
strength.
Yeah. I love that answer because I've said multiple times to people like another reason for me getting into hunting is to live a more like Paleolithic lifestyle. Like that's how we were bred as humans to live, was to live off of the land, to hunt animals, to gather produce. And so I think that, yeah, I resonate with that answer because, correct, it doesn't really exist anymore. But I would like to try to live whatever time is left in my life as close to that as I possibly can. So I think that was cool. Where can people find you if they want to follow you, if they want to reach out to questions, if they are interested in whitetail, Asio gear? Where can they find you?
Yeah. Yeah, so Joe Miles Hunting on Instagram and Facebook, and we've got a YouTube channel. Mission Whitetail is the name of the YouTube channel, and then Asio Gear is all, and that's ASIO Gear, and that's on all social media channels, and then that's our website as well. And yeah, if anybody has questions about anything whitetail related, Joe at Asio Gear, that's my direct email, and I love talking whitetail, and I'll probably uh, drive people crazy if they email me, because I love to talk about it, and share as much as humanly possible.